Okay, so I'm gonna go over ceilings. Um, and in Revit, creating a ceiling, just a very basic general ceiling, is pretty simple and straightforward. But I'm gonna go ahead and explore. We're gonna kind of cover the automatic ceiling, which is the easiest ceiling to create, then a sketch ceiling, and then we're gonna complicate it a little bit by adding soffits, and then going over how to add a ceiling at an angle. So if you want to do like a cathedral ceiling. So a ceiling that follows the angle or the slope of a roof. Now, I know we haven't covered roofs yet, but figured to cover since I'm covering the topic of ceiling, I might as well cover the topic of ceiling at an angle that follows a roof. So let's jump right in. I have the model that I've been working on, okay? The only difference is that I just really quickly added these two rooms. I added these 4 3/4 partition interior walls with 2 doors. Okay. I have no idea what size I made them. It's kind of arbitrary. Um, the whole point that I'm looking at, or the point I'm trying to drive across, is creating a ceiling inside of an enclosed space. Okay. So when we cover ceilings, or when we create ceilings, we're going to go into our reflective ceiling plans. So that's going to be over here in the project browser. And it's not in the floor plans, but we have another tab that says ceiling plans. And here you'll notice first floor and second floor. The ceiling plan, let's actually go into a section just to, let's bring this section down. So when we're referring to the reflective ceiling plan, okay, a first floor reflective ceiling plan, that means that you are standing on the first floor, looking at the ceiling from the first floor. A second floor reflective ceiling plan, it means that you're standing on the second floor and you're going to be creating the ceiling on that second floor looking up. Okay. So I'm going to jump to the reflective ceiling plan on the second floor because I'm going to use the automatic ceiling, which is the simplest one. And that really works well with these enclosed rooms. So I'm going to go into the second floor ceiling plan. Let me go ahead and hide. I already modeled the roof. Hide and view elements. I modeled the roof kind of in anticipation of what I'm going to be covering in a bit, but I don't want to confuse you guys just yet, so I forgot to hide that. Okay, so here, what we're doing is we're looking at the ceiling of the second floor. Now, I mentioned when we were talking about the floor plans that a floor plan is cut at 4 feet above finished floor. Okay, so let's go to that section. So again, floor plans are cut 4 feet above the finished floor. Ceiling plans, reflective ceiling plans, however, are cut 7 feet 6 inches above the ceiling floor, and they look up. So that cut is somewhere around right here, 7 feet 6 inches, and it's looking up, whereas the floor plan is cut at 4 feet and it's looking down. Okay, so that's the difference. So that means that when I go to the reflective ceiling plan on the second floor, it's cut at 7 feet 6, and what I'm looking at is what is above everything that is above 7 feet 6 looking up. Let's go ahead and change our detail level, set that to fine. Let's add some color here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and create a ceiling. So I'm going to go to the architecture tab, build panel, and then ceiling. And it's going to give me two options. Do you want to do an automatic ceiling or a sketch ceiling? The automatic ceiling is the fastest and the easiest type of ceiling to create. Okay, an automatic ceiling will, let's go ahead and click here. The automatic ceiling will automatically recognize an enclosed space. Okay, it'll recognize an enclosed space and it'll say, okay, you just want me to create a ceiling in between these 4 walls. And it's going to be that simple. I just click inside. You could barely see it, but there's that red kind of reddish orange line. Okay, that's saying that it's recognizing these spaces. So it's as simple as just clicking and the ceiling is created. Let me undo that. Control Z again. Okay, that's the automatic ceiling. Um, before we actually go in and start clicking around, we really should come over here to the properties box and select the type of ceiling that we want. And we click on this pull down. And we have three different types. We have a 2 foot by 4 foot ACT system. ACT stands for acoustic ceiling tile. And it's what you see in almost every office building, right? It's that speckly type ceiling, and they're also in like classrooms. They're kind of everywhere. Um, if you just look up and it has that kind of speckle, that's an acoustic tiling system. It's a lot easier to install than just doing drywall, and it really helps actually. It's very convenient for kind of office type building, things like that, that require a lot of air conditioning in between the floor and the ceiling and electrical work and all that stuff that kind of goes in between a floor. It's nice to be able to just hang an acoustic tiling ceiling. Okay, but this system is actually more for kind of commercial use. So then we have these down here, the GWB on furring and GWB on metal stud. GWB, excuse me, GWB stands for gypsum whiteboard, right? When we were covering walls, I talked about gypsum wallboard being drywall, right? Most people know it as drywall, but within the industry, we call it gypsum board, gypsum wallboard. So GWB on furring, we talked about what furring is, and then GWB on metal stud. So it's very similar. It's just instead of a wood kind of stud or wood piece of wood that you nail or that you screw the drywall onto, here it would be a metal stud. Okay. So I'm going to stick with the GWB on furring. And then in the properties box here, it's going to give me some options, okay, which is which level do we want it to be on, second floor, which is correct, and then the height offset, 8 feet. Now this is the default height. That means that it's going to place the ceiling 8 feet above our second floor, which is what we want, right? Probably what we want. We're going to take a look. And then right here it says room bounding. What this means is that it's going to create a ceiling in a room that is bounded by walls. Okay, so in other words, an enclosed space that's enclosed by the walls, which is what we want. So we're good there. So now all I really have to do is go in and click, and that's it. I'm done. I'll hit the escape key, get out of the ceiling command. Now let's go take a look at that. I'm going to go into the section, and there is my ceiling. The ceiling is placed 8 feet. Now that's the top part. Let's grab it there at the bottom. 8 feet above the floor. Okay. However, in this ceiling, and this is just an example, I actually didn't set the roof heights correctly. But if we wanted to adjust this, we could use the move tool. We can click and drag. I can specify a different height over here and say, you know what, this really should be 9.6. I don't know, I'm just making that up. So we can always move and adjust the height of the ceiling after the fact, and it's a lot easier to do so in section. So we could take this and move this right inside there, and so on. Okay, so we could always adjust the ceiling height after the fact. Now, what I want you to pay attention to really quickly is the placement of the ceiling. Notice that the ceiling starts on the outside of the drywall. Right, so if we're looking at our wall here, here's the core, and on the interior side we have the drywall, and so the ceiling starts inside, or so there's the gap of the drywall, and then the ceiling begins. Okay, so that's going to be important for this next step when we create a ceiling using the sketch mode. So let's go to second floor, Oops, sorry, reflective ceiling, second floor. Really quickly, notice that we have two second floors. I click and drag that over. So I have second floor and second floor. These tabs do not differentiate in kind of title, the reflective ceiling plan or floor plan. But if we pay attention really closely to the icons, you'll notice that the second floor here is the outline of a building, and there's really nothing on the inside there, whereas the second floor reflective ceiling plan has some boxes on the inside. So just so you know the difference through these tabs, the ones with little kind of boxes on the inside, that's referring to the ceiling plan. Okay. Um, okay. So sometimes, let's go to ceiling. I mentioned that the automatic ceiling will create a ceiling within an enclosed space. So if I place my cursor, and you have to place your cursor on the inside of an enclosed space. If not, you'll get that little circle with the slash inside. If I move my cursor to the inside here, I can click and it'll create the ceiling for me, right? Because it recognizes this enclosed space. Well, sometimes in certain situations, you might not want a ceiling throughout the entire place, or sometimes you want a change in height, or sometimes you want some sort of differentiation in ceiling height. Think of an open floor plan where you have a kitchen and a dining room and a living room space, and maybe you want maybe each space isn't enclosed in between four walls. Um, and so we might, or there are situations where we say, you know what, we don't want the enclosed, I'm sorry, I'm in the command. I'm gonna go ahead and, so we say we don't want the, an entire ceiling throughout all of the three rooms. We want each one to be different. That's a situation where we would use the sketch mode, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and delete this really quickly though. Right now I'm clicking on the ceiling and I can't select it, okay? And that's because in order to select the ceiling, you have to grab it on the sides, so kind of on the profile. And that could be a little tricky in a plan view because when I go to the sides of where the ceiling would be, it wants to select a wall. Now I could use the tab key, but you have to be really careful. And it's very, very faint. I'm not sure if you guys could see. There's that thin blue line that shows the profile of the ceiling. So I could click that, click it there, right? I don't like to hassle with that. So I always just go into a section view and I'll just click it there and delete. Oh, I have to click it and delete. That to me seems a lot faster than going to the second floor, moving the cursor and hitting tab. Okay. However, whatever you want to do works for you. So we're on the first floor. Let's take a look really quick at this 3D model. So here's the situation, right, where we have a lofted area, okay, where we're not going to want to create a ceiling throughout the entire first floor because it's going to create ceiling in this area that we want open to below, right? Because Revit is going to recognize these four walls and it's going to want to create a ceiling covering this space. So here's the situation where we're going to want to create our own ceiling shape. So let's go into the reflective ceiling first floor. So ceiling plans, first floor, double click. Okay, so here is our ceiling plan. I'm going to change this to fine and then shaded. Okay. Now it looks like we have a ceiling, but we don't. This is just the underside of the floor. So when I click on it, you see it says floor. That's the floor. When I go into, let's go to the architecture tab. When I go to ceiling, if I was to leave it at automatic ceiling and create a ceiling, it's going to cover the entire floor, which we said we don't want. So I'm going to undo that, Control Z, and then I'm going to click on sketch ceiling. And by clicking sketch ceiling, it's going to take me into sketch mode. Now, at this point, we've been here several times before. This is where we have to deal with the magenta lines. So I'm going to click online, okay? And I'm going to zoom in and I'm just going to start drawing, okay? But remember when we were taking a look at that wall and we said, oh, the ceiling starts after the drywall, okay? So you're not gonna, when we start creating using the sketch mode, we're not going to start on the core line, we're going to start on the finished baseline. I'll go ahead and click there. Let me zoom out. I'm gonna click there. Again, in order to pan, meaning moving this way, hold down the shift key and then hold down the right button on the mouse. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to go over here. I'm going to go around the staircase. Okay. Now, similar to everything else, we could always go back and edit the ceiling. So if you went in and you added the ceiling around the staircase, that's fine too, because once you add the staircase, you could always select the ceiling and then edit the ceiling so that you can create an opening. Okay. Creating an opening in a ceiling is the same way as creating an opening in the in a floor. Okay. So in other words, if we wanted to create an opening, we can simply just create an opening like that. I'm going to undo that. Okay. So that's it. We created the boundaries. I've gone over the rules on these boundary lines. Remember, no intersecting, no overlapping, one continuous loop all the way around. Hopefully we've met that. I'll hit the check mark. And there we go. There's my ceiling. Okay, let's take a look at that in section. So here's the thing. I left it at the default height of 8 feet. Okay. This second floor has a height of 10 feet. So what I can do is take this and just use the move tool. And I'm going to grab it from this corner right there and move that so that it lines up right there. Okay. We do not want overlapping geometry ever. So in other words, this, if I move it in here, although I can do it in Revit, we don't want that because remember what's happening inside here. We have studs inside here. We have insulation. We have electrical. We have electrical boxes and so on, plumbing. So we physically cannot put the ceiling right here. So that would be, putting the ceiling right there would be incorrect. So let's move this. Okay, move that down. So there we have it. That's creating the ceiling using the sketch mode. Let's go to the 3D view. Let's take a quick look at that. You know what? Let's go. Can't really take a look at it from this side. But if we go into the section box, hit apply, click on the section box, and now click and drag. There we go. Now we can look at it from below. And I could zoom in, and there's my ceiling. Okay. So generally, that's it. That's all you're going to be doing, creating the ceiling and determine whether it's automatic or sketch. Now let's complicate it a little bit more. Let's say we want an actual soffit. So soffit ceiling is kind of like I don't want to call it a fake ceiling, but it's a portion of a ceiling that is below, that falls down from the ceiling. It could either be, sorry, so it's a portion of the ceiling that falls down below the second floor, below the floor above, and it has an opening in the middle of the ceiling. Now, this could be either decorative or it could also be functional. Sometimes within the soffits, we put air conditioning ducts, or we'll put other kind of mechanical elements in to hide it inside the soffit, or sometimes it's just simply decorative to add some kind of some sort of kind of visual element to the ceiling. Okay, so that requires kind of a double type ceiling. So if you're still not understanding what a soffit is, just watch the finish this portion of the tutorial till we get to the end so that you could get a better understanding. Okay, so I'm going to use the same ceiling. Let's go into the section. Actually, let's go into first floor reflective ceiling plan. So let's say I want to create a soffit. I'm going to create one big soffit at the center here. Okay, so I'll go ahead, let's go to section. And I like doing this in a section because I can visually see it. So right now the height offset is at 9 feet. Let's bring this down to, say, 7 feet. Hit apply, and there we go. So there it is. Okay. I'm then going to want to edit the boundary. So let's go take a look in the first floor reflective ceiling plan. And I click, and I notice that it's the floor. And I noticed that the color, if I was paying attention, the color changed as well, right? In other words, if I click here, and if I hit the tab key, I begin to notice that my ceiling, oh, gotta save the project. I'll begin to notice that my ceiling has disappeared. It is no longer there, right? Which is odd because in my section view, there it is. But then why can't I see it in my first floor reflective ceiling plan? Anybody? Nope. Okay. So if you remembered at the very beginning, I said that a reflective ceiling plan is cut at 7 feet 6. And my ceiling is at 7 feet. So if the reflective ceiling plan is cut at 7 feet 6 and it's looking up, then I'm not seeing it because the ceiling is below 7 feet 6. So it's technically kind of behind the cut. So we're going to have to adjust that. These heights, the 4 foot for floor plan or the 7.6 for reflective ceiling plan, all of this can be adjusted. Okay, so we're in the first floor reflective ceiling plan. I'm going to come over here to the properties box, and about halfway down, I'm going to scroll down. But halfway down, I'm going to hit this this row here that says view range. I'll go ahead and hit edit. And this tells me this is where we create the settings for this one particular view, for the first floor reflective ceiling plan view. Okay. I'm not going to take all this time to kind of explain the view range. I think it's a lot easier to just hit this button right here that says show. And we have this really informative diagram that tells you what is what. Okay. What I'm going to focus on though is this cut plane. So it says that the cut plane is offset 7 feet 6 inches. Okay. From the associated level, in this case, the first floor. I'm just going to take this and say, no, you know what? Bring that down to 7 feet. I'll hit apply, and then I'll hit OK, and there's my ceiling now. Now I see my ceiling. Okay. All right. So we're back to trying to create a soffit. I'm going to go ahead and select the ceiling, and I'll hit edit boundary. That takes us back into sketch mode. Okay. This time I'm going to use a rectangle, and I'm going to just create a box right on the inside here. I'll hit the escape key twice to get out of that sketch, or sorry, out of the draw tool. And I'll just click this line and say, you know what, this I want to be 4 feet away from that wall. This one's gonna also be, I'm just gonna go 4 feet all the way around. 4 feet there, and 4 feet there. Okay. So what this is going to do is create an opening. So it's essentially gonna cut a hole inside. We'll hit the check mark, and there's my hole. Let's go to the section view. And we could kind of see it, right? You notice the difference in color here? We still see the double line because we're still seeing the ceiling, the back portion, so this portion of the ceiling, okay? Let's go to the 3D view and take a look at this. So granted, we do have a section cut box, okay? So we're not seeing the entire thing, but we're able to see that we have a ceiling that is 7 feet below the floor, and it has a hole in the middle. Now, before we add the second portion of the ceiling, because this middle part where the hole is, that's going to need the ceiling too. But the part that bothers me right now is the fact that it looks like the ceiling is just floating, right? We really need to add some wall space or some walls all around here so that it looks like it's actually attached to something. So that's what we're going to do. We have to add some walls. Now let's think about this. How do we add walls that are not attached to a floor? Well, we have that option, remember, of adjusting the base and the top constraints. Remember, we could offset. So that's what we're going to do. So let's go back to the first floor reflective ceiling plan. And I'm going to create a wall. Notice that I'm creating a wall not in the first floor plan, but in the first floor reflective ceiling plan. Right? That's the view I'm in. I'm going to go to wall. I'm going to click on this pull down, and I'm going to want the interior, let's just go with a 4.5-inch partition. I want the location line. So in this case, I'm going to want the face of my wall, which is like the drywall, to line up with the edge of the opening, right? So that in that sense, or for that reason, I'm gonna want click on finish face exterior. Now base constraint, okay, I'm gonna set that to 7 feet. Now we're gonna go back and change this. But for right now, we're gonna leave it at 7 feet. Okay. Top constraint, well, I want that to go up to the floor above, which is the second floor. And I'll hit apply, and we're good. Okay. At least I think we're good. Let's try this out. So I'm going to start in one corner, click, and I'm going to move up. And I see the wall kind of being created, and it's ghosted, right? And I'm noticing that that's not where I want the wall. I want the wall to be on the other side. So I'll hit the space bar, right? That's where I want the wall, because I want the wall to be constructed on the edge of my opening. So I'll go ahead and click there. I'm going to go ahead and click there, and click there. Now, I'm also going to want it along this edge too. So let's keep clicking. I'm going to click there and click. Let's just make sure we get all the way to the edge there, right there. And you know what? While I'm at it, let me hit the escape key just once. I don't want to get out of the wall tool. Still want to create walls. While we're at it, let's go ahead and create a wall around our staircase. Hit the escape key. Now I'll hit the escape key twice. And now let's go take a look at this in the 3D view. That's kind of what I want, right? Like the kind of right there's the wall there, and there's the soffit, just like that. Okay, that's kind of what we want, because if we look closely, what's going on here? This wall is going up to the second floor, meaning it's going through my core and it's going through the finished material. Which, hey, I told it to do, right? I said top constraint up to second floor, and we know that the second floor is to the finished face, not to the underside. And then if I look even closer, the wall is also going through my drywall and the furring, which I mentioned we also don't want. We don't want overlapping geometries. So this is all stuff we're going to have to fix. So let's go back to the first floor reflective ceiling plan. And I'm going to move this section. Oops. You know what? I might need it. Let's go into this regular section right here. Okay. Now I'm going to click on one wall, and I'm just going to click and drag this up. And I'm going to adjust the height, just like that. Now I can do the same step. Notice this changed it, but it only changed it for this one wall. and we had created a bunch of walls. So using this method, I would have to create a bunch of sections and have to select every single wall, right? And have to move everything manually. I don't want to do that. That seems really tedious. What I can do though is, since I have this wall selected, or I could select the wall now that I know where it needs to be, okay? You'll notice that with the wall selected, the properties of this wall are there. And now we could see that, oh, it changed the base offset, right? We placed it at 7 feet. It's now at 7 feet, 1 1/4. And the top offset is negative 0 feet, 10 3/4 of an inch, because it was up here at level 2 and it's going negative, going down 10 3/4 of an inch. So depending on how good my memory is, I might try to remember these numbers, or I could write them down on a piece of paper. What I'm going to do is just highlight this one, and I'm going to hit Control C. Control C is copy, right? Control C is copy. Control V, V as in Victor, is paste. So by copying the base offset, all I really have to memorize now is just the negative 10 3/4. So I'm going to go to the first floor, and we can already see, right, this wall has already disappeared. And what I'm going to do is select this wall, and I'm going to hit the Control key on my keyboard to do a multiple selection, and I'm going to select all of these new walls that I created, just like that. And I'm going to edit all of them at the same time. So I'll click inside there, and I'll hit Control V, right? That's to paste. And I'm going to change the top offset. This is the one I had to memorize or write down. -0, space 10, space 3/4. I'll hit apply. And now let's just go in and double check that. That looks good there. Let's go to the other section view. Yep, all of these are correct. Let's go to the 3D view. And there we have it. We have this kind of soffit space. Now we're not done yet because we still have to create a ceiling. Right now, if I'm standing right underneath this opening and I look up, I'm looking at the core. I'm looking at the bottom of my floor. So I have to cover that up. But at this point, that's pretty simple. I'm going to go back to the first floor. We're going to go create ceiling. Not automatic ceiling because it's room bounding, right? Automatic is by the walls. So I'll just hit sketch. And I'll use the rectangle tool. I'm just going to create a quick rectangle over that outline. Hit the check mark. Notice that I didn't even specify the height. What I'm going to do is go into the section. There's my ceiling. I'm just going to use the move tool. I didn't specify the height because honestly, I don't know what that height is. Right? I know it's -10 3/4 down from level 2, but I don't know how far it is from there to there. I mean, we could measure it, I guess. But it's just easier to click, to add it and then adjust it later. Oh, it's 9 feet. I could have added that, right? But then I would have had to come in and measure. Hopefully you're noticing that my kind of strategy is just throw it on there and then edit it afterwards, right? Manipulate the dimensions and the locations afterwards, okay? But anyways, we have a ceiling. We have a soffit ceiling to be exact. So let's go to 3D view, and there we have it. That's what that looks. The lighting kind of sucks, so it's kind of hard to see. Really quickly, side note, notice that right now I'm trying to get a look at the ceiling and I'm orbiting around and it's not really giving me a good view. What you could always do is select an object, and when you select an object and then you start to orbit, Revit will recognize and will orbit around, will make that selected object the center of your orbit. So now I can orbit around the object that's selected. If I click over here, it now changes that object selected to the center. So there we have it. That's how we would create a soffitted ceiling. Okay. Now, one last type of ceiling. And that is going to be for a slope. So let's go to our second. Actually, let me turn on. How do I do this? Let's go to the flexible ceiling plan, second floor. I'm going to turn the roof back on, which I had hidden. Unhide view. There we go. Okay. So we could go ahead and take a look at that really quickly. Oh, it's also hidden in this view. Whenever you hide something and then you unhide it, you have to unhide it and hide it in that one particular view. So you're gonna have to redo this step all the time. But anyway, so here's my roof. Okay, let's go to a section so we can take a better look at this. There we go. So this is a sloped roof, right? We consider this a flat roof, but flat roofs are actually not flat. Again, we'll cover that when we cover roofs. But here's a roof that is at an angle. Okay, you'll notice that it is a slope, and it's at a what we call a 2% slope. So it's the equivalent of a flat roof, but it's at 2% of a slope. Up until now, all of our ceilings that we've added, right, have been flat. And so by default, in Revit, it wants to create a flat ceiling. So the question is, well, what if we don't want it flat? We want to rotate it. We want to follow the slope of the roof. Well, we could do that. Let's go into the second floor. And I'm going to do that not inside our automatic ceiling spaces, but I'm going to add a slope over here on this side. So we're going to go to ceiling. Obviously, we're going to have to go with the sketch ceiling. Okay. Now, last time I went around, right, and I used the line tool. Well, we also have the pick walls. We also have this one here where it says pick lines. I like that one. So let's go ahead and click pick lines. And now all I'm doing is, instead of drawing, I just have to pick the line. Now, when I pick line, it picks the entire line. So it's actually picking this magenta line. But I know, so I'm going to know, sorry, I know I'm going to have to go back and fix and edit that. But luckily, we have a nice little tool that's called Trim Extents, TR. And I'll click there, click there, click there, and click there. Okay. Now I'm not going to hit the check mark just yet. You'll notice that next to the check mark says slope arrow. I'm going to click on slope arrow. Okay. But really quickly, actually, let's leave it here with this little infographic here. I'm going to create an arrow. Now, let's see, can I move my cursor there? No, it doesn't let me. Pay attention to the way that the arrows are being placed, right? So like in the top view, the word it's magenta. Notice that we have a blue arrow there. And then look at the image on the right. Okay. So the base, or what we call the tail of the arrow, is where is kind of, it's the bottom portion of the roof, right? And the arrow portion, right? The angled or the arrow is the top portion of the slope. So again, the base, the tail of where the arrow is, that is the bottom portion of the slope, and the arrow is the top portion of the slope. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense in a minute. So I'll hit slope arrow, and I'm going to click on one side all the way to the other side. Now it doesn't necessarily matter how you start. Your first click is the tail, and then the second click is the top portion, right? Now we can rotate this, and we can flip it if we wanted to. But I'm going to go ahead and leave this one as is. Okay, sorry about that. Now over here in the properties box, we'll notice here it says height at tail. Okay, so that's what I want to change. So I'm going to click inside there. Sorry, and just to make sure I had the arrow selected, that's how I got these properties. So I'm going to click on the height of tail and click on slope because I don't want to specify the height. I want to specify the slope, and that's right here. So I'll go ahead and highlight this. I'm going to type in 2%, and I'll hit apply. Okay, and that's it. That's all I'm going to do. I'll hit the check mark. I'm going to move this section back just because I want to be able to see the entire slope of the ceiling right here. So now I'll double click into the section, and there's my my ceiling. Now I noticed that I have this issue here. I could always click on the viewport and bring this out further. There we go. So I could see the entire section cut. So I didn't specify the height when I created the ceiling, which at this point, you know that that's not kind of my method of working. So at this point, I'll just click on the move tool and I'm going to bring that straight up. And there we have it. We now have a ceiling that follows the slope of a roof. Okay. And that's how we would go about creating a slope roof. Now let's go back really quickly. No, not there, to the second floor. If we go into edit boundary, if you had to, we could always adjust, click on the arrow. If you didn't have a slope and you knew the height, then you could adjust the height of the offset right there. Okay. But again, the bottom portion, let's go ahead and take a look at that really quick. Are you sure you want to? Yes. Notice that the bottom portion, which is this side right there, the bottom portion of that arrow or the tail of that arrow, right, is right over here. So that's what I mean by the tail of the arrow is the bottom part of the slope, and the actual arrow is the top part of the slope. Okay. If you flip it around, then it's going to end up sloping this way, and it's going to go against the angle of your roof. Okay. So that's it. That is a kind of dive into creating ceilings.